Yo, yo.
Hello, hello.
Up, buddy.
How are you?
How are you?
Oh, not bad. Just a long day of shooting, and yeah, yeah. I was really looking forward to having all this done at the studio and with the setup I sent you, but sold that camera, so I have to get another cable for another camera.
Nice.
Yeah, so I might as well just be a little bit of festive and kind of show the wife's decorations in the background for now.
Very well.
Yeah, yeah. So how are you today?
Not bad. Not bad. I'm hanging in there. It's been
Yeah.
one of those weeks where Wisconsin's shutting down again, which is great.
Oh.
But it just makes it harder for everyone. That's for sure.
Yeah. Are y'all like it's like a full on shutdown?
So I mean, back to basically where we were when this thing started. So we
Mm.
were open to like 75% this summer, when things were getting better, and then we just took a big downward spiral.
Mm.
It's not a great situation here for sure, but I think they're just basically trying to be cautious with Thanksgiving and everything coming up. So
That is true. Yeah, I saw today I think a lot of schools in New York closed.
yeah, saw that. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that's pretty crazy. I don't know if that's gonna happen anywhere where I am, that being
Right.
Georgia. So
You guys are pretty, you're in a few of those states like Arizona and just Texas just announced like, yeah, we're not doing anything else. It's like, oh,
mm, yeah, it's gonna take a shift in the higher levels of things or someone up there to say, no, you're gonna do it.
exactly.
Yeah, but we don't have that until January. So
Yeah, there you go. Hopefully people. I shouldn't even say that. I'd say hopefully people are smarter, but we've seen it. So
yeah. First I wanted to say like I really wanted you to be one of the first people on this new wave of episodes. Like you and I discussed before, I think there needs to be more of a conversation around other things outside of just the careers themselves and the photos themselves, the jobs themselves. There's so much more to unpack, which you've been doing on Creative AF, which is, man, ever since I started listening to your day one, I've blown away with how like impactful it is.
that's awesome.
Um, I just remember I remember getting emotional, like listening to some of the stories that the people on your episode have gone through. I swear every time I hear something about a relationship that's like the one that just gets me every time.
Yeah.
Um, so kind of going back into how did you get Creative AF started?
So I've been meaning to do it for a while, actually, like a long time. I wanted to get something started. I'm kind of an audio buff, and so I wanted to get something started in 2018 after I kind of went through my, like 2017, 2018, after I kind of went through my rough time, my depression and kind of anxiety, where it was at its worst. I knew someone needed to talk about it, but I just wasn't ready to talk about it at that point. And I just, it's so not. I mean, it is about the place you work. That has a ton to do with it as well. Obviously, as people have talked about on the show, but I didn't want it to look like it was that. When and to start something while I was still there, and to just have it be awkward. So, but I also needed to. I also just in the midst of coming and starting at a new startup, life takes over. Moving my family across the country, literally, um, and it really took till Matt met Desmond and the crew at the Sports Creative Slack group. Uh,
Mhm.
they basically were just like, "Hey, can you come and talk about mental health one night with us?" And I was like, "Yeah, let's do it." Because I've been fairly outspoken about it on Twitter, and And that night alone, I basically was just like, okay, I'm going to start this podcast. Something needs to be done. We need to have this discussion. One of my closest friends, Will Posthumus, who was the first episode after mine, um, I said, we got to do this, man. We've been talking about this for a long time, and I think it's time. We actually talked about, starting one together and talking to some different people, but I was just like, all right, I'm doing this. And literally just, I had the equipment already because of the work that I do now with BETR. And I said, all right, let's make it happen. And just recorded my episode, threw it out there, and that was the beginning of it. I talked about this at MLC conference where I was literally standing in my kitchen. I downloaded a free, YouTube header design app that was absolute shit. And I was just like, all right, I'm going to make a point of this to not spend hours and hours or weeks on a logo, going through the whole process, because that's like the whole point of what I'm trying to talk about, right? Like,
Right.
and so I
Right.
made something within 3 minutes, probably, while I was sitting there, added my signature to it, and threw it out there kind of as a joke almost. Not as a joke or a slant by any means against design, because that's what I did, but it was more of just like, hey, I've been a firm believer that story over everything. And I've been a student of Pixar and a student of John Lasseter and so many of the the amazing work that they do. And so I was just like, I need to tell these stories and spend less time worrying about the creative of it, which is ironic, considering what I do for a living and what I've done for a living. So that was the point where I was just like, I need to do this. And I threw it out there, and the response was really cool. And I, within a couple days, maybe one day, had probably a list of 15 people who were already ready to be like, yeah, let's do it. And a lot of people were going through a lot of really, really hard times, because that was kind of the beginning of furloughs. I mean, it was literally the reason that we did the mental health night, the Zoom on the Sports Creative Slack, was because furloughs were just starting to happen. And so it was like, okay, we've got to talk about this. We've got to make sure our family's okay, And so that was the impetus behind starting the podcast.
Good timing. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think so I've come across this already with interviewing people, pre-interviews, where I totally agree with you, like getting the story going first. I almost wanted to rebrand all of this, call it something different, have a whole other spin on it, but really at the end of the day, like that was going to hold me back from talking to everybody and putting this stuff out there. So I totally see that. Did you have any anxiety or fear around, because you have a fair amount of people on your podcast talking about specifically who they worked for. Did you have any anxiety or fear around like people from those organizations hearing this and kind of maybe taking it the wrong way?
So my whole thought process going into this was, if we're talking about mental health, and we're talking about individuals' mental health, and we're talking about the fact that an organization could have potentially, like, everybody's responsible for their own mental health, right? But there are a lot of things that lead into that. And if I'm out there saying X organization was one of the reasons that, I got this, or look at Dave, Shaponik's episode. He loved being at work, and look what the Penguins did to him. It was his outlet. So a lot of people had different experiences with how work is involved, right? Some people, it's their outlet. When the relationship's struggling, the relationship tends to be struggling because of work sometimes, and how much we put into it. But my whole thing was, if there are going to be people that have issues with this, then they need to look in the mirror a little bit as an organization. And so I wanted to bring light to that. Like, we need to bring light to that. I was super, super excited when he told me about what the Pens did for him, and making it known that, hey, Dave's struggling, and we need to be here. We're his family. We're here to help him. Not everybody's going to do that. I've heard stories of people who have asked for time off and for mental health reasons and have not been granted it. And to me, there's just no excuse for that. And so, in my opinion, those companies need to be called out on that.
Yeah.
Because there's in this day and age, especially in 2020, in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of everything we're going through, like there's just no room for that in my playbook, at least. So
Yeah.
we were very, as you probably heard in the episode with Will, we were very open to say, listen, we're not bashing the Dolphins here, or we're not bashing football operations here. This is just what happened, and this is happening all over the place. We just want to put it out there to say, this is what happened. This is my reaction to it, so people can be aware of it.
Would you be open to having people from these organizations on your podcast, talking to, like, having the conversation amongst the people that are struggling with everything?
Yeah, I would love to. I'd love to understand it from both sides too, because I know some really good people who are close friends of mine in the HR world who would be the first to say, go. I mean, I've heard it, even in the past few weeks, like some friends have taken mental health leave. And that for me is like, yeah, that needs to be talked about much more often. We instilled it better, basically, flexible PTO and take whatever mental health days you need. And it's hard. I think, like, we have to walk the walk, because that's what we're talking about as a company. But it's hard in sports. You've been around it long enough to know that it never stops. It is 24/7. And so, you want to feel like you're more than, just replaceable. And the old line that you're one of 32, and who do this job in the country. And there's 1,000 people who want your job. Like, we've all heard it. We heard it enough. And those days are over. Like, it's some interesting conversations that I had last night when the Cleveland Cavaliers announced their new creative director was going to be a minority partner in the team as well. And I had a lot of interesting conversations via Twitter and via text about it as it was happening. Like, I love the fact that they're putting creative first and making that a priority. But how do we change this? How do we change this globally? And will this actually change things, or will it just mean more work, less people, on top of it? Time will tell with what the Cavs do. But it was an interesting scenario that just happened last night,
Yeah.
on it. Yeah. To answer your question, I'd love to talk to anybody, if there were people that were wanting to come on. I want to make this, I certainly don't want to make this a bitch and wine session type podcast, but I want
Yeah.
people to be able to express their feelings openly. But I also want to make sure that that we're being real about everything and seeing everything from both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, that would be cool to get some people on.
Yeah. I talking to so many people about it myself. I kept getting, that, like, of course I'd love to come on and talk about this stuff and be specific, but, like, I'm really worried about burning bridges. I kept getting that, burning bridges,
Yeah.
burning bridges, burning bridges. I know it can be a tough thing, especially in our industry, because you feel like if you burn a bridge, it's a small community, especially kind of, once you get to those pro level sports, some, collegiate a little bit.
Yep.
Once you burn a bridge, you're kind of setting the precedence for other people will know that you did burn that bridge.
Sure.
And the best way I like the approach that you're talking about. You don't want to make it a bitch and moan fest. You don't want to sound like you're owed everything for nothing. Like I would love to have these conversations with, these top level executives and other people that are making these decisions too, because I feel like at the end of the day, it is their choice how all this is kind of operating. It's really interesting. You told me before that you guys had mental health leave at the Dolphins.
We
Um,
did, yeah. We had an employee assistance program there.
yeah, how did that conversation get struck up, and how did that all happen?
I mean, uh, we had a really cool, um, like HR department, and it's changed and it's transformed over a while. But people in that department are just real with you, and they will always be real with you. And
Mhm.
so to the point where you could go to them and say, like, I didn't tell many people that I was dealing with what I was dealing with, because I still didn't know that that's what it was at that point. Um, until like after the fact, where people saw it and they're just like, you're not yourself, you know. But it's very well known, amongst the company, that we had an employee assistance program and that the NFL had an employee assistance program.
Mm.
Um, and so, there were signs up in the break rooms and things like that. And it was part of your onboarding, but it was just always an open door if you wanted it, to say, hey, I need this, or I need some time off. And it was really a lot of it was at the mercy of your boss too, and your direct report. So it's like, hey, we got to figure something out because I need some time off. And I went to surf a couple point times and was just like, I'm not well, I don't know what I can do for this. And he was very much like, whatever you need to do, man, like, let's figure it out. And there was full support there when I was going through it. So yeah, that was if there's one takeaway in that, is that make sure you ask, like that if there is something there, or if there's mental health leave that you can take, medical leave, like, it's a medical issue right now, and some people will brush it off. But hopefully you work for a place, like I've always said, if you work for a place that doesn't take it seriously, you may want to think about working for some other place,
Mhm.
if you're concerned about burning bridges, but you're literally walking on a bridge that's on fire every day, like, the job's done. Like, don't worry about that. That's when I always people always say, like, oh, I'm just concerned about burning bridges, but then they'll tell you in the next breath, like, my life here sucks. And it's like, then the bridge is on fire and it's going to collapse really soon, and you're going to be on it. So, like, figure your shit out, and run the other way.
Yeah.
um, or be fully in. So that's
No,
that's it's an interesting perspective for sure.
that is. And I want to come back to the what happened to you, like what that specific day was, because it kind of ties into, I think, what a lot of people feel when they like, okay, you say there is this this time off I can take, this leave absence that I can take to
Yeah.
take care of what's going on mentally. But there is a level of shame involved with it all, because everybody, along with there being a mental health crisis, there is this big epidemic of like hustle, hustle, hustle. And
Yeah.
sports is one of those industries that's just like they beat it into a lot of the people there. So when you're asking for time off just because something isn't going on, or something just doesn't feel right, there is like this feeling of shame asking for that time away. There's no
Yeah.
like I have a cough, there's no like I'm bleeding, it's just something's not right.
Right.
Um what what was that day like for you, that day that it shifted, it you knew something was wrong?
Um, there was a morning, I remember it vividly, um, that I went down to we have a little coffee shop that we turned one of the field level, suite areas, a high roller area, whatever you want to call it, into a little coffee shop for during the week. And That was where we would always just go down there, and I usually start my morning down there and things like that. And I had a project. I was not doing great at the time. We were in the midst of, I think we had just come back off of a cheer cruise, which is great, but those days are, those are your 4 a.m. wake up calls, and you're editing until midnight, 1 a.m. And so those are not the super awesome shoots that everybody think they are. But I, I was just kind of exhausted. I knew that, I was still going through some panic attacks at night, waking up, in full sweats, those sort of things. Um, and I sat down and tried to work on a really simple project, right? Something that I could do normally in my sleep. We were building a book. I was building a photo book for the person who was in charge of our renovation of Hard Rock Stadium. It was going to be beautiful. We were going through all these photos, and you know how it is, like archiving photos. We don't always do it perfectly. We wish we did. We wish we had everything in the perfect place, but hard drives later, you go home and you dump an entire take on a hard drive, and you forget to put it on your server or on Photo Shelter or whatever you're working. I just couldn't find some pretty critical pictures, and I was freaking out. And it was going to be a big book, and Jeff Wynn was designing it, and I just needed to get my shit together. And I just remember, like, I lost it at the table, and I started just bawling, and I really didn't know why. And it's the point where you start crying, you don't know why, that you're like, something's up, like something's not right, that my body is reacting this way. And so I came up to the office, and or I think I texted Surf and I said, "Can you come down here?" And he did, and I was just kind of like, I don't know what's going on. I don't know why I'm acting this way. This is a very easy thing to do, and his response to me was, are you just not, like, are you feeling like you're not organized? And I was just like, yeah, but it's because of all this other shit that's going on in my head right now, and that I'm dealing with. And it, to give it a little more context, it was just, I'm a people pleaser. And that is literally, like, I got my first tattoo that says serve. And I got it when I turned 40, and whatever you want to call it, midlife crisis or whatever. I just was excited about getting a tattoo because I'd never, we can talk about this later, but it was more like I'd never thought that it was something that I'd ever do, but I really wanted to. And so I was I wanted to be a servant leader. I wanted to lead my team that way, and I did. But it was just 20 years of that caught up to me almost in an instant. And that last year, my last year at the Dolphins, um, every little thing that I went through, with people, or building the schedule out for games, and having people say, "Oh man, I wish I had some more games," and just like, I know they weren't meaning to do that to me, but it was just everything that was piling on. Every kind of comment like that, or thing like, just, you constantly get asked for sideline passes, or you constantly get asked to, we had set up a really good system where on the road we'd have, friends or family, or photographers assist and second shoot. And so it just got the point, after 5 years of it, everybody was like, I want to do this. Can I do this with you? Can I do this? And everybody wanted to know quickly. And everybody wanted to know the beginning of the summer, or, in April, if they could, when the schedule came out, like, how many games can I shoot next year and all this stuff. And I was just like, it just became overwhelming. There was too much. I couldn't handle it. It's not that it wasn't too much. I'd handled it before, but I couldn't handle it at that point with everything that was happening. And so it all just kind of hit this peak, and I just remember losing it that morning. And then that's when I started having some real serious conversations with folks there, and started, like, actively looking. And then it's just cyclical, right? Because I was like, I am meant to do this. Like, I'm meant to work in sports and lead creative teams and be a photographer. Like, that's all I knew, and you get scared. You get scared shitless of looking out somewhere for a new job, even though you probably need to move somewhere. Um, I had set a goal, basically, to say, I, we bringing on the Miami Open tennis tournament, that our owner invested in, and we were building 30 championship courts on, on campus. And I basically said, I don't want to be here for it. Like we had been working on it, and that's weird to say, right? Because it's something super fun, but at that point it was just like a ton more work. And I wasn't really seeing my family much at that point anyway. My kids were getting to the point where they were growing and and turning into young men, and it was just like everything was piling on. We were shooting concerts all the time and everything that was going on. So it was just kind of hit me hard at that point, and that's really when I said I got to do something different. So
What was the impact like at home as far as like with your family? Because you mentioned that you're doing all this work and you're starting to feel this thing begin to bubble up. Did it have an impact at home?
Yeah, because I was two different people.
Hmm.
I was John the Dolphins photographer and creative director, and I was John the dad and husband, and those weren't meshing at the time. If I looked back even further, I could probably tell you numerous times where they weren't meshing before, like because I spent upwards of 9 seasons in professional baseball, uh, and in the midst of 2 playoff years where my sons were born, and being on the road for that, and hosting an all-star game in 2011 and planning for that for well over a year, and then pretty much being gone for 2 weeks. I mean, it was always something that um, that affected life at home.
Hmm.
And who would have thought, who would have thought that going to a startup, I would have more time at home. But I did, and it was instantaneous, and it was a massive change for me. And whatever you want to call it, like the road life is a whole different life, and when you're out there, you kind of feel invincible. And that's an awesome euphoric feeling, but it's not real. And you go out and you have all these amazing dinners and unlimited wine and just everything all the time every weekend, and then you're coming home and you're crushing some ramen and mac and cheese, and it's normal life. So my therapist told me, I knew what cognitive dissonance was, but I didn't really understand it as much as I needed to. And he told me basically like, you are deep in it right now, my friend,
What exactly is cognitive dissonance?
Cognitive dissonance is 2020 in a nutshell. Let's put it like that. Cognitive dissonance is you're acting one way for one thing, or you're being told one thing, or you're being gaslighted by someone or something, or a president, whatever you want to put it. But then in your heart that's not who you are, and deep down that's not who you are. And so that is where the struggle happens.
Mm.
And so it's like you have to kind of ask yourself, who am I? Am I this guy that's on the road living the baller life, whatever you want to call it, or pretending to, right? Whatever. It's normally really what it comes down to is you're just going back to your freaking hotel at night. But there is a lot of going out and certainly living it up, and this was like probably me living a little more, because I kind of grew up a little more conservative,
Hmm.
and didn't do much of that, coming through into a small conservative Christian college, and didn't live that life, didn't have that real collegiate experience that a lot of people talk about,
Hmm.
and then working at ASU for my first job, being one of the top party schools, and working with student
Oh
athletes.
shit.
And I was in grad school at Washington State. That was craziness too. And then going into minor league hockey, and that was traveling, and working these crazy hour weeks, but getting on the bus and drinking with all the guys and stuff like that. So you forget real quickly that you're a 40-year-old dude with 2 kids, and that sometimes you need to get knocked back down to reality on that a little bit, and that's kind of what happened, and basically what my therapist told me was like, you got to figure out who you are, and you have to make that decision on who you are, because you can't be both of those people successfully.
True.
So that's really the epitome of cognitive dissonance there.
Yeah, that's it's crazy how much a photographer's life can end up like a musician's life.
It is.
Right? Like no, one of my favorite photographers, of course, is not a sports photographer, it's Annie Leibovitz. And if you know her story, she toured with Rolling Stones, and the life that she ended up living with touring with them. She ended up having a real life moment with that. But no, I definitely see that. I haven't had it to the extent. I've definitely traveled for certain things, certain gigs, and been invited to do things.
Sure.
And you end up editing. You're like, I'm gonna either go to sleep or I'm gonna go edit from the day's take.
Yep.
And it helps me not only just probably feel better the next day, but you kind of feel guilty because that's an opportunity for you to be with these guys. Like, being a part of a team like that, you want to connect with them better, and one of those things is going out with them. Jeffrey Salter, who I've heard speak and I've assisted before, like he always will say, like, for me to get to know the guys, sometimes I'll get there early and I'll go to the club with them. Like I want to be able to connect with them on that level, so that when we're shooting, it's like that.
Exactly.
Family. So that's exactly. And especially being in a team setting, and being, I'm sure with a Miami team, that's that's something right there for sure, I'm sure. But no, I think you bring up therapy. Therapy is an amazing tool. Something that it takes some getting, like, I was used to it as a kid. But it takes some convincing for a lot of other people, because they feel like what they are going through is their own thing, and they don't want other people to really know about it. I think therapy is an amazing tool for people. And then I don't know what it is, but my wife is an amazing, like, she'll make me understand reality really fast. She'll check me. She'll really check you on, like, are you sure that's not exactly who you are? I'm like, oh, I guess you're right. I love that about my wife, because sometimes it needs to happen.
No, definitely.
So along with all of this stuff, we talked about therapy being a really good way of getting some of this out and handled. Boundaries. Would you explain a little bit more about boundaries? Because I feel like that, as a people pleaser, can be so fucking hard to do.
It's
I
mean, God, there's entire podcasts that can be made about boundaries. And to me, man, I'm blanking on what it was, but there was it was something I tweeted a while back about boundaries that really stuck with me, and I'll have to find that, and we can chat about that later. But boundaries are those decisions that you have to make to save you from yourself, really. And I think that's too often we connect boundaries to keeping other people out, and that's the definition of a boundary, right? But more often than not, in this situation that we become, where we you know, we kind of think we're invincible. We're flying on private jets all the time, and getting into the, you know, club VIP and things like that, and you forget quickly that, you know, you, if you don't set boundaries for yourself, you can run into problems. And so then what happens is the boundaries, those kind of doors leak open, and then other people step in, and other people that you may not necessarily have wanted to step in, or you did want them to step in, you know, but people can take advantage of your boundaries pretty quickly. And so if you're not very open about setting them, and very open about, you can set as many boundaries as if you want, but if you don't tell anybody what they are, they're useless. Because then you just kind of look like an asshole, which is fine. You're allowed to. One of the things my therapist said was, if you want to keep doing this, you know, and you want to keep moving up in the world like this, sometimes you're going to be looked at as an asshole, and that's okay, you know. And I never wanted that, right? As a person who is like, lives to serve other people and to help other people and to grow other people and to teach other people, like, to me it was just like, come one come all, like, let's figure it out together. And what I quickly realized in that last year was that my boundaries, I had opened them up so much that I was getting taken advantage of, and that was from my own doing, right? It's no fault of everybody else's, and some, that's the thing we have to think about. Like, those boundaries are are those things that we have to allow ourselves not to do, and so that to me is the importance of, not only setting boundaries, but talking about them as well, because it's really, again, it's not something that, that you can, that, like, you can set the boundaries, but people will, like, it's almost like rules, right? Like, I look at it like this, and I'm dealing with this with our kids right now in the midst of all this stuff. And um my sport law professor told me once, and I'll never forget this, uh because his name was Sam Adams, and he was just awesome, and it was a great name. And he said, a rule is not a rule unless it's enforced, right? And I use that a lot. And if you break that down and you think about that, right? Like, I can set up a ton of rules for my kids, but if I don't enforce them, they're going to they're going to break them. And if I and that's and then it's on me, right, for them to do that. I'm not a big rule follower guy. I don't really, like, I probably grew up more as a rule follower than I thought I did. But then, as the more I've gotten older, the more I've kind of been like, all right, what are these are social constructs? I'm not talking about like speeding or things like that, right? But rules around whether it's religion or things like that, if you want to start getting deep into that stuff. So to me, it was just like, uh, if we're not enforcing our boundaries, then they aren't boundaries. You know, so the same thing goes there. So I have done a much better job of that, even just really in the past 2 years of kind of setting my boundaries. I'm being very open about them, and then really enforcing them, for myself, because you can't, the only person you can change is yourself, right? I can't change anybody else. um, and we're seeing that as a country right now. So
Yeah, I think there is a word that I think is pretty tight with boundaries, and it's respect.
yeah.
Um, you know, you when you don't really set enough boundaries for yourself, it's almost like you kind of don't respect yourself.
Yeah.
And you're allowing other people not respect you.
Right.
And I love that you said that your Sam Adams quote,
Yeah.
um that a rule, if it's not enforced, isn't a rule. Because it's one thing to be, just from the freelance photographer perspective, you're inundated with so many different clients from all the different walks of business,
Yeah.
and life. I mean, it can be just one person or it could be a company. um So if you don't have boundaries set in place, they're going to walk all over you, and they're going to name their price, and you're just going to go with it. Um, and I think another thing too that's interesting, because I guess I haven't had the experience you've had working with an organization,
Right.
is it's one thing to be a freelance creative,
Right.
and to be a staff creative. The boundaries are, I feel like there might be different, because you
Yeah.
know the rules of the company, but you also know your rules, or you're starting to learn your rules. Like, how does that work? Like, explain to
Yeah,
me how the boundaries can be set at a place of work.
sure. First and foremost, it's the same thing as anywhere else, right? You have a code of ethics, whatever you want to call it. You have a handbook, and it's your job, it's your responsibility. You sign off on that. So it's your responsibility as an employee to make sure that you are doing the best you can to stick with that, right? And there's a lot of rules that we had to follow, like you can't accept gifts of over X amount of dollars, but you were offered all of them, just for a chance to have access. There were rules around selling your tickets. You couldn't sell your tickets, like period. There were rules around posting your credentials, and I mean, you name it, right? These are, we're talking about, like small things. Like, you don't have it probably somewhere as a freelancer it says don't take a picture of your credential and put it online, but most young freelancers, they're so amped in the moment, and they do a lay down shoot of all their cool stuff that they need to put on Instagram to show, like, this is what I'm doing, check me out, right? So there's a ego play in there that we can get into later, that social media has put on us, right? Because we didn't do that before. We called our mom and said, Mom, guess what? This is what I'm doing.
I still do that. What are you talking
about? Yeah, same with me. But the difference is that you are under, like, same thing goes there, right? If the rule is not a rule unless it's enforced. So there's going to be a lot of people who are going to push the boundaries of the rules, that happen in there. But then you mix in the fact that you are, that I was one of, I had myself that was full-time as a photographer, and then Pete that was full-time as a photographer, and that was, Jeff was there. He was also our photographer, and he was also our art director, but everybody else was freelance. So now we're combining everything, right? And I'm combining all these things that I have to worry about. And we had so many discussions and deep discussions about, like, when is it okay for a freelancer to post images post game, and as social got much better, or when Instagram basically took off, it was just like, then social teams had to come into play and say, hey, these are great pictures, guys, but you guys got to give us some time to post them, have some exclusivity on them. But what do we want to do as photographers? We see a great shot, we want to get it out as soon as we can, right? Like, I think about the Cardinals shot, Kyle's at or Derek Spencer, yeah. And everybody right off the bat was like, I can't wait to see what Derek got. We all knew he got it, right? Like, I mean, especially with how clear the sidelines are for this. Like, it's always a question if you're going to get that end zone Hail Mary shot, but at that point, it's going to happen and you're waiting for it. And of course he nailed it, right? And of course he nailed the everything, but it was one of those things where it was just like, everybody wanted him to throw it up there, but he knew that he had to wait, probably, for the team, because the team threw it out. They threw out that awesome gift that they did of all of his frames, and then he threw it up quickly after that. So it was that's just kind of a microcosm to say, like, the rules are the same but different, and so as a freelancer, you're kind of expected to come in and follow that, and you probably sign a contract to that extent. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but yeah, boundaries when it comes to working for a team, versus working, individually for yourself are very different, because you do have so many more things that you have to worry about, and you have to make sure that you have in place, because then you are representing more than yourself. At that
Hmm.
point, you're
Hmm.
you're representing the Dolphins, and there's we can get into the conversations about credit and all that stuff. Like that's a hot topic. Um,
Yes, it is.
I'm always of the mind that if you got paid to do that shoot, you got paid to do that shoot. They own the rights to that image, and they don't necessarily need to credit you.
Hmm.
But if your job as a freelancer, and I'm talking about like full-time staffers, right? But if your
Hmm.
job as a freelancer, and your life depends on getting work, and more work as a freelancer, you better believe that credit's important. And there's multiple
Hmm.
lawsuits out there right now about credit. So
Yeah.
interesting.
No, that's a very good, we can definitely go there because I feel like there is a big discussion around that. And that's one thing I wanted to definitely start talking about more on this podcast, because I feel like there's definitely not enough education around it. And I do sometimes get the understanding of why crediting people on social media and whatnot happens.
Yeah.
Um, with all due respect to every industry and team that has those rules in place. Going into like the whole freelance situation, which I think I've run into plenty of times, where you are a freelancer, you're doing things for a team, and you're not part of the team. You're kind of your own thing, but you're working together on this thing, and you put out something amazing, and that can help propel you. You can put it out yourself, but you know that team or that organization has the bandwidth to promote what you did
Right.
to another level. And then it does kind of, it's just like that question's always in the back of your mind, like, why the fuck did they not tag me in that?
Yeah.
Like it, because I guess I don't know where you want to go with that, specifically being somebody who's on staff and who's hired freelancers for teams. But I do respect it, but there's always just so many kind of like questions in the back of my mind. I'm sure there's questions in the back of a lot of people's minds of,
Yeah.
can
And
it be different?
so here's I can break it down a couple different ways, right? So I can
Mm-hmm.
break it down into a fact that, um first and foremost, if you're on a work for hire contract, there's no, there's no reason that the team, like legal reason the team would have to credit you. They
Yeah.
may want to credit you. It's the same thing as like when, you know, photographers versus writers. There's always a photographer versus writers, beef, right? Well, the writers get all this credit, and they're getting paid, but why don't the photographers? I think it's a valid point. I think it's a very valid point. When we were just doing print publications before social media ever happened, you better believe that like every photo credit was on there. But that was such a different time, and now there was very little value in that, and you got paid well for those images. You got paid placement, or you got paid a day rate. The problem that we're facing right now is that, the pay rates have gone so drastically low. The introduction of the LLC, or the LCC, which we can discuss later, and the fact that, you know the day rates that I was making for Sports Illustrated in, 2007 and 2008 versus what they pay now, it's it's insane. It's drastically insane. Talk to any of those guys. Talk to John McDonough, and talk to Robert Beck, or talk to, John Beaver, and they're not doing it anymore. That's the thing, right? Because they realized, like, they went through a big, like, really, I don't know what you want to call it, right? That was normal. Like, you would get X number of dollars for being on the cover. You get X number of dollars for being in a double truck. You get X number of dollars for a quarter page, and you knew what you were going to make. And now anyone and their mom can buy a social media picture off of AP for $10, or whatever it is. So when we talk about that, it gets really interesting. From a credit standpoint, if you were to freelance, if I were to hire you on a contract for a team, I'm paying you, and I'm paying you really well. You can ask any of my photographers that worked for me that was very important for me. My budget was big because I had to make sure that, like, I grew up in that time, right, where I was just coming into photography when digital was starting, and the film kind of separated photography back then, and so it started becoming this issue. And now, to me, there is a massive value. Like the team could say, I want to credit our photographer, I want to credit our videographer on this. They could just choose to make that decision, right? The Cavs announcing that they hired a creative director, they didn't need to do that. You don't ever see that, in places usually, among teams. So that's a change for the better, I think. But that being said, that there's so much value in that audience right now. And so when you talk about like how much partners have to pay just to be tagged, and we're talking, hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? To be tagged in a series of posts for Bud Light or something on the pictures that I took. That's what the freelancer doesn't quite necessarily. That's where the difference is. So saying that, oh, this team could tag me so easy, but the fact is, like, there's a ton of value in a tag. And then you have to go back through, because now you're attaching yourself. The team is attaching themselves to you as a freelancer, in some way. And so if you have some sort of crazy history of doing something bad, the team doesn't necessarily want that. So they don't have time necessarily vet everybody, when it comes down to that. But I mean, look at the AP stuff that's happening right now. Like NFL teams, like if they use an AP image, they have to tag it, because if those AP photographers if they're AP creative versus versus AP in general, it's different. And so there's just so many things that are out there, right? Because some people, that's their livelihood, and so they need to be tagged for that, and they're not getting paid for it by the team. It's very, like, I'm talking in circles because it's very exciting when it comes down to it. But the fact of the matter is, like, there's a ton of value on a tag. And I am, it's cool to see the teams calling out some of their creatives. I think they need to be consistent when they do that, across the board, because photographers are put in the limelight sometimes. And then, there may be 6 or 7 videographers who work for the team who are doing amazing work, and, not getting that, or not getting any of the credit, right? But the fact of the matter is, you don't, some people pay their bills with credit, and some people, because that means more work for them. But breaking it down, like, how many Dolphins fans are gonna, if Bryce Francis' name is on a picture, are gonna call you and hire you for a shoot from that? Probably very, when it breaks down and comes down to that. So you got to figure out, like, what's important for you. It's probably more important for you to have a great repertoire with the team, so that they hire you more, and they want to talk about burning bridges, right? Like, so that they want to give you more money to take pictures. And so that's the kind of a roundabout way of answering that question, because I don't think there's a definitive answer for that. And I do go back and forth on those things a lot. But if it's simply credit for clout and you want to get more followers,
that makes sense. That's definitely, I can see that argument a little bit. The whole, just to gain more followers thing, that feels like definitely going into ego, like an ego chase, more than it is about. I tell these, something that I want to nail into a lot of young creatives going into these areas, these avenues of their career. If they want to be a professional something, or a professional sports photographer, videographer, graphic designer, creative person, and they picture this unrealistic reality of what it's going to be like.
Yeah.
And it's amazing to see what they think is real when it comes to that world.
Yeah.
And it's one thing to think about it that way, and it's another thing to think about it for the people that are there now.
Right.
It's like if their livelihood could change, then maybe the reality that a lot of these up and coming creatives,
Yeah.
it's actually, you can be like, yeah, you're right, like you can get there, you can have all this, these amazing experiences, you can take care of your family.
Yeah.
But it's not that.
Right.
There's definitely been plenty of times where I've thought about switching career paths because there's just like a weird, and this kind of goes back into some mental health stuff, is like this. I think it unlocked my depression quite a bit. I didn't understand that I had it.
Yeah.
Last season, doing the LCC stuff for MLB last year, I think was probably the thing that cracked the door open for it, for sure. And I have to start approaching this with a little bit of a different tone, because at first I was so angry and spiteful, and I understand the opportunity there, which it can be a great opportunity for a lot of young creatives. But
Yeah.
I was 27, about to get married, wanted this for my career, but at the same time wanted to support us, my wife,
Yeah.
and the toll it took on my health, the toll it did end up taking on our relationship a little bit, especially right before getting married.
Yeah.
It's something that, I don't know. At first, it feels like it's on you.
Yeah.
Um, you feel like you take on a lot of responsibility for how you're feeling, and it kind of feels like those organizations don't take responsibility at all. To the point where I remember I was just telling somebody about this the other day. Like I ended up at the end of this, I think it was like a month or two after the season was over. I think I had enough time to recover,
Yeah.
and went to my boss, who was like head of creative for that, and apologized, because I knew that I had gotten emotional and gotten pretty upset about things,
Right.
and took it out on him, and kind of took it out on the head of the program, the whole program. And he's an amazing person. Lucas Stevenson, he's an awesome person for being so understanding. But he was like, I think you need to apologize to the person above us too, because I think there was some animosity there, which I still haven't been able to mend that bridge.
Yeah.
Because I think that person maybe just took it like Steven or Lucas couldn't, which made me feel worse.
Yeah.
But I guess where I want to kind of go with this is like the toll that it takes. We take a lot of responsibility for how we start to feel. Like I don't know from your experience, like when you started to feel that way in the coffee shop, you started to kind of feel responsible for that, and then
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how long it maybe took for you to kind of say like, well, it wasn't really all just me.
Sure. That's actually a really good question. because I was trying to figure out like we all make the choices, right? So you made the choices and you
Oh
apologize
yeah.
for them.
Hmm.
We all make the choices to do what we do. We make the choice to accept a position that we want to go into. We make the choice to stay in that position when we may not think that it's the best for us. I have this conversation with Will all the time, and we talk about it a lot. In that, like, we choose our destiny here, right? Like, we are the ones who can only make that decision for ourselves. I can talk to and I can lament to a therapist, I can lament to my wife, I can lament to my friends, all that I want. But the fact of the matter is, none of those people can make that decision for me on what I want to do. So I was this puddle of self-doubt, and like, I was you could ask anybody, right? I had some really close friends at the time, um who I probably took it out on way too much.
Mm.
And then I really kind of had to look back into myself, and say, what are the things that I did that put me in the situation? You know, because I think there are, once I identify that and I can change that mechanism, then I am now a better person for it. I have learned those decisions, or I've learned to just deal with those decisions that I made and move on. Um, I don't know that, again, moving on is a bad term, because I don't think you ever move on, from that sort of thing. I think you set new boundaries to, like we were talking about, and you just figure you just learn how to deal with it. Like, I still deal with depression all the time. I don't deal with panic anymore, which is great, right? But I deal with depression, and I'm on medication for depression and anxiety. Those things help me, and they're simply tools, right, to help me cope. But when I start feeling that raise in my heart rate, or, like, I don't like, I hate having tough conversations with people. That's one of my biggest things that I would always cause anxiety.
Mhm.
But you have to tell yourself, like, you have to have those tough conversations. First, you have to have them with yourself, and then you have to be able to have them with other people. Like, that's part of growing up, and that's part of leadership. Period.
Mhm.
I envy Will in the fact that he's just super straightforward about it, and he'll call me out on my shit all the time. And he did in the middle of that time that I was going through, right? And he would question it, because we shared an office, and that's the tough love that you need, and you're not willing to. Sometimes it sucks to have to deal with it, right? But
Mhm.
so I felt a change. um I probably didn't feel a change until I applied for that job. Well, I didn't even really apply for it. It was more of a hey, we want you to come work with us. And that to me was like, okay, I'm going to work in a media startup. Although I feel like this is a little bit of imposter syndrome happening, I had to take a big step back and say, I put myself in this position, right? I spent 20 years learning everything that I possibly could, more than that when you count school, and surrounding myself with all of these people, and sitting in on these meetings and going to these conferences. Like, there was a reason that I did all that, and now it was all coming to fruition. And so, while I felt at the time like there's no way in hell I'm going to get another job, because I'm niched into this role, like, I can't. What else can I do besides this? And then I've quickly realized, and it's made me a much happier person, and a much, like, mentally healthier person as well, because then you realize, like, there's other shit that I'm dealing with now too. Like, then you kind of dive into the relational stuff, and you dive into, like, thank God I got out of it when I did. Don't and people listening, don't take that the wrong way. Think it was more of like, thank God that I had the opportunity to move into something new before this pandemic hit. Because I I feel for everyone who's in it right now. But there are a lot of people doing amazing things, right? While they're still in it. But for me, it was like, that was a personal, thank God, because there were a lot of reasons why, it's much better for me here. Being able to move back to the Midwest, being able to move into a bigger place for our family, and just, kind of running a company on my own now with some amazing people that work for me, and not having that constant pressure of having to perform 24/7 and be on 24/7 and be constantly looking at my email and on my phone and looking at my text 24/7. Now I get to turn it off, and so those things that it took me a solid year and a half to get over, um, to get out of that rut. And there's a lot of PTSD that comes along with it,
Mm,
you know.
mhm,
And I feel for, I have a lot of tough conversations with a lot of people. And I've not talking to not talked to a lot of people, that used to be close friends of mine. And that's just, again, comes down to boundaries and comes down to triggers, and things that you have to set. So it doesn't mean I don't love them still, or I don't think they are, could potentially be a part of my life at a later point in time. But there's sometimes you just have to say, I have to take care of myself during this time, um,
mhm,
and it doesn't always come off the right way, for the way those other people think, but is what it is. I had people after I put out my first episode text me, and they were just like, "I'm so sorry. I feel like this is my fault." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like, it's not your
mhm,
fault, Like, these are choices that I made, that put me in positions to have to deal with this stuff. And so, as a human being, I am the only one who can deal with it. And so I choose to go to therapy, and I chose to, set my own boundaries, and I chose to have to deal or not deal with people that could potentially have been toxic for me and things like that. So, or situations, not even necessarily people. So there's a lot of those things that came into play, but it took me a while. I still think about it every single day. It's constantly in my head. And but I also constantly try and talk to, specific people that I know that are still in it, and are dealing with it. And that's why I started the podcast too, um,
mhm,
to get more of that out there, to say, like, you don't have to feel like you're stuck. There's other stuff out there for you, even though that tends to be the sentiment that a lot of people say, is that I
mhm,
feel like I'm stuck, and I feel like I don't have anything else that I can do, especially now in the midst of this craziness. So yeah.
mhm. It's amazing how you know you're with everything you said, the level of vulnerability. That's one word that's so hard for me to say. Vulnerability that you have. The second, I'm sure you've probably started to see this the more and more you've done the podcasts. The higher that sense of vulnerability for yourself got, the more people started to like, hey, like I need help, or you just started to hear
Yeah.
more stories and people asking for help. Um, and that shit's scary. Yeah.
Right. And in the pre-interview, we talked about, like what is that one thing that that you have to that you figured out about yourself, or like, and how is being vulnerable, like, how does that change who you are as a person? And it does, big time.
Mhm. Yeah, it helps you connect with people on a whole new level, especially in this industry where people are so a lot of creative people are isolated people and they don't
Right.
really like people know what's going on, and they're always trying to prove that they are better than what people think they might be, or to, prove to themselves who they think they're better, you
Yeah. Yep.
know.
It's a
But yeah, it is it's crazy how much just a little bit of vulnerability can do.
yeah.
And hopefully, more people hear your podcast and start, uh, feeling like they can be a little bit more vulnerable, just a little bit. Like just that little bit kind of cracks that door open to things that people can start dealing with. So
Yep.
it's your podcast can be medicine for sure.
Yeah.
I know we can go in so many different there's so much more to talk about amongst like the mental health aspect of things and more how things kind of go in the industry, but I think I do have one question that kind of would hopefully bring us back into like a little bit more of like a positive light. Is like, do you still shoot anymore?
I do. I'm looking over here at my cameras that I have, and I miss, Rob sent me a picture of his new Nikon haul the other day, and I was like, holy crap. Like, and that's what we had. Like, we built something really special, like at the Dolphins and at the Diamondbacks as well. And I had the opportunity to be, funded by a team to do what I love, and for a long time at such a high level, and to make some really amazing connections, right? So the connections that I made with Leica, and with Roland and Kieran at Leica, were those life-changing connections for me, and to be a kind of a unofficial ambassador. They don't really have ambassadors, that's not their business model, but to be an unofficial ambassador and to spew the love of Leica, and just because I think it's beautiful. I think nothing compares to their monochrome. Nothing compares to the quality of the imagery. They get a lot of shit, they own it. Like, they own it. Like they're the only people that can release a $6,000 point and shoot, right?
Point and shoot black and white. Or what did I saw something with Sean put out.
Yeah. And get everybody to buy it, right? And so I was this kind of unofficial, like, everybody, all the players and things asking me, what's that, like, what is that little point and shoot? And I was just like, man, like, this is the shit, right? And I also am a firm believer, like, I'm going to contradict myself big time here, that the best camera is the one you have on you, right? To steal from Chase Jarvis long time ago when he kind of coined that. And I'm a huge fan of what you can do with your iPhone, and have loved it. And even, these days with a $400 GoPro, and the images that you can make are stunning, because, like, what are the images that we use mostly? They're 1080 by 1080 at 72 DPI, like, that's it. So it's not the tool, right? I always tell people that for me right now, I have explored light. Being colorblind has helped me do that. So that's why I love shooting and drawing in
You're
black and white.
colorblind.
Yeah. So that it's an interesting thread. It adds a uniqueness to the way that I see things. And so I tell people, I said, like, if you can not shoot in color, try it for a while, like, because then you're going to start seeing light completely differently. And so now, like, once it's ingrained in you, for me, it's just finding light. I was literally standing out across the street waiting for some lunch the other day, and just saw, in a strip mall, like, beautiful light coming clear and beautiful reflections, and to take that in, on my phone and instantly turn it into a black and white picture that I was like, that's cool, and it's just the sun shining through some pillars in a strip mall, right? But that to me is, I got a chance to spend 3 days in New York City, kind of when I was at my lowest, and I just needed to get out, and I needed to be anonymous for a while. And that's what I, told my wife. I said, I need to be anonymous for a little while, and I need to go find out why I'm doing what I'm doing. And not a lot of people know this, but it was one of those times in my life that was, it changed everything for me, and I got to walk around the city, and I was, I mean, it was crazy. I got to walk around 9/11 Memorial, and my dad was in the Pentagon when the plane hit, so that hits it home to me really hard, you
Wow.
know. And I just got to make some beautiful images, but I had to break it down to, like, we get so caught up with the fact that we have all this gear that can do amazing things, and a lot of times, really, we just need one camera, and so that's why I look over and I have a Sony and a Leica, and basically only ever shoot with like a 50 and the 27, and I think I've learned that less is more, when it comes to that, and that I can find the image within an image as well. So I am shooting. I started documenting a little bit of my kids and their quarantine habits early on, and that lasted not very long, but because it's more of like, dad, stop, taking our pictures. But I also saw this, just, I try to capture that beautiful light, whether
Mhm.
it's just glimmering across their heads as they're playing their video games, or the light coming off the screen or something like that. Like, to me, those are you're making memories, but you're able to make beautiful memories. It's so different. So when you can learn, like I've been able to teach myself more about that. And now I'm back in a place, like, I spent 20 years in Phoenix and Miami. So I was in hot, and then I was in hot and humid. And there wasn't much difference, right? Contrasting, you get this crazy direct overhead sun all the time that's just super hot and super in your face and everything. And um, now I'm back up in the Midwest where I get 4 seasons again, and I can really mess with that, and I can really play with it. So yeah, I always try and have a camera really close to me at all times.
Mm.
To this point where now I tell everybody I get to just shoot for me now. I'm not putting myself out there in my little town of Sun Prairie, to say, hey, I'm a photographer, everybody come hire me, let me do your senior pictures and all this stuff. If people figure out that that's what I do, awesome. I have some friends that I shoot with in town, and I've taken the drone out quite a bit, just to see what I can find. And but now it's just like I'm exploring a lot of new avenues in that.
Mhm.
I'm exploring. I got this really cool microphone that's like ASMR. Um, it's a
Cool.
binaural mic, right? And so I'm, as an audio geek, it's so much fun to like take that out with a GoPro and,
Mm.
walk through the forest and get that 360-degree sound, or take the GoPro up to Dora County where we went to and make some, just beautiful sunset in the water photos, on Green Bay. And it's very different, than
Mhm.
what I was before, that's for sure. Um,
Mhm.
and there are times where the cameras sit for long periods of time, and that's totally fine. That's the cool thing about it, because then when I come back to it, it's even that much more exciting for me. But I've also been able to really explore as an artist, because I've always been an artist, explore all those other avenues of my art. um,
Mhm.
and I've been able to draw more, and I said it since I was a kid. I always wanted to be a Disney animator. Like, that was the ultimate end goal. And so I've been teaching myself more animation,
Mhm.
doing more animation, and sculpting, right? And I just like started picking that up. But now I have, like, I think about that. I have the time to do that now, and that's the biggest thing. Where I didn't really have that. Every weekend was, you know, um, with the Dolphins, when you're in season, you were traveling, and there weren't weekends, or you were at home, and your Sunday's gone, and you're right back in the office on Monday. And that's just, to me right now, to be able to turn it off at 5 or 5:30 every day, and like really turn it off, and not check email after Friday until Monday morning, is just something that's entirely refreshing to me. Do I still sit and doom scroll all night? Yep, just like everybody else, because welcome to 2020. We want to see what crazy news is going to happen next.
Mhm.
but I do, when I force myself to be creative, and sometimes I don't have to force myself, then like it's so much more rewarding to me now, to
Mhm.
be able to make art for myself, or specific people um, than to make art for the man, if you want to put it that way, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, very different.
I think you hit on some really beautiful points when it comes to shooting for yourself. Um, the way that you describe, having moments alone with just one camera, one lens.
Yeah,
Um, it's something that I think a lot of people don't really utilize much anymore.
right.
I think photography was an art form before it was what it is now. Well, it was meant to document things, and then it's fought its way into being an art form
Yeah,
because people could use it for self-expression. Um, and I look back at the times that before I was trying to make a living from it. Uh,
yeah,
the amazing conversations I had with people that I would just like meet up with and just shoot. I loved shooting portraits, loved meeting new people. That's how I met my wife.
yeah,
That's just making some cool stuff without having necessarily a big reason for doing it.
right.
Um, and then I don't know, I've started to believe, at the top of COVID, I started doing this stuff with people. Have you ever heard of like phototherapy, or I think there's another term for it, but people using photography as a therapy tool?
No, I mean I've done art therapy a ton, but I mean I assume it's very similar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, I'm sure it's pretty close. I started to do that with people at the top of COVID because there was this piece of me that knew that I found myself at the beginning with it, and I feel like a lot of people kind of need um, that tool to help understand themselves better. Awareness is a big thing I think photography offers. It helps. Um, I don't know. It helps you find your perspective on the world a
Yeah,
lot clear, very very clearly. Um, and I started doing it with people, and I did it with. I think I had two or three people, and it's amazing to see like these people weren't photographers. Like
yeah,
the only camera that they had sometimes was their phone, like you said. Um, and it was amazing to see what we kind of started to understand about them. I think I ended up doing a whole month and a half with most of them.
hmm, that's great.
Um, I did one couple just to see how that worked with a couple. Um, and it was so fascinating. Um, Unfortunately, like I had to stop doing it along with the podcast at the time, but if if I could really like leave photography today, I would do that in a heartbeat along with the podcast still, because I feel like there's I believe after doing that, there's no such thing as a bad photo.
Right. Yeah.
Like no such thing. Like as much as professionals want to, shit on people all the time about having a bad photo, I think there's a reason why everybody, you know, presses the shutter button.
Yeah.
There's something that they see, that's something that they're trying to express. It may not be in the most professional of uh, ways, but there is something there. And to sit there and talk with somebody about what it was, what they saw, it's pretty amazing to see how that can unlock a lot of people's um, awareness, and start opening up some. It's amazing too because it's not like this thing where you unlock something and then you go down a dark rabbit hole.
Right. Yeah.
Like a lot of people get excited. They're like, oh, like this thing that is fun to do is helping me see these, maybe some bad things, but they're helping me see that so that maybe I can like start shifting my perspective into a better way.
Yeah. No doubt.
Um,
That's awesome.
One cool little thing was like we perspective, or no, excuse me, composition is something that we always preach in photography.
Sure.
And you think some Karen out there is not gonna know what composition is.
Right.
Well, one of the couples that I worked with, it was interesting to see just giving them the task of shooting horizontally with their phone rather than vertically. And the level of understanding of composition is just there.
Yeah.
Like you didn't have to sit there and tell them rules of thirds and all that stuff. Like they were doing it.
Yeah, they knew it.
Yeah, and I think I would really like to start coming back to that approach to things, because I feel like it's a much healthier way of approaching what we do.
Yep.
It's a fun, definitely a more humane way of doing things with what we do. And sometimes it's even means putting the camera down and just taking a mental photo.
Yeah, that's it. That's that last point, like of just putting the camera down. I would get asked a lot by family or friends, like, oh, you must just take a crap ton of pictures at home and all that stuff. It's like I don't have a home archive. It's a mess. Like I spent years, doing that professionally. Mm-hmm. The last thing I want to do when I come home is do that. Thank God for Google Photos now and those sort of things, and Apple that can organize them by face. Like it's saved everything. But you're right. Like there are times when I'm just out, because if you put a camera in my hand, I'm going. Like I'm in. And sometimes I will forget about what's happening around me. And so it's this catch-22 situation, right? When you're out spending time with your family, like I can see amazing, beautiful pictures if I'm going on a hike, or I'm, taking a jet ski out somewhere or doing something. But the last thing my kids want is for me to be, off taking a whole bunch of crazy pictures, right? They want dad to be carrying them on their shoulders and things like that. Like, and that's the difference, right? It's being present in the times that you need to be present, and then understanding that there also are times where you can become photographer, because it is therapeutic. And I think there's a fine balance there, but I think you can have both, and you can do both successfully. It's just a matter of it's kind of a matter of who you like, who you are as a person and your psyche. If you can do both at once, great. But there's lots of us who are like, oh, I'm in the zone now, or I'm in the flow. Like, I'll be another hour,
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna miss dinner. Like nobody wants that. Especially when you're out doing this. But yeah, that's a super valid point.
Yeah. How much do you feel like intention plays into that too? Because I see intention being, like you talk about the family moments, especially nowadays with social media. You feel like you got to capture everything for the gram. So the intention to possibly have your camera with you wherever you go can be for that purpose alone.
Yeah.
For the ego, the ego strike on social media. And I think that's another reason why I don't really carry my camera that much anymore like I used to, is because I know what social played whenever I took a photo. Like I did so much with the intention of it being on social.
Yeah.
And now if the moment requires me to capture it for just this beautiful thing that I want to remember forever, I'll definitely have my camera on me for that.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's so interesting. I have a couple examples of that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we went up to Door County, they have a dark park there, and that means it's one of the darkest places in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And so that you can see everything. You can see all the stuff in the sky. Why am I blanking on what it was that I went up there to shoot? Um, but it was the galaxy. I mean, essentially, you're seeing like the galaxy and everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so that was, I made it a point to say, okay, I want to go do some long exposures. And I told my wife ahead of time, I told my kids ahead of time, like, one of the reasons I want to go the Milky Way, I want to go shoot the Milky Way. I never had the opportunity to shoot it before. I seen amazing pictures of it, and then we can go to the Stark Park and shoot it. And so that was the only one intentional thing that during that vacation of 5 days that I wanted to do with my camera. And they knew it. And so everybody got behind me on it, and we got there early. And then it was just like, we are, all right, Dad, we get it. We know why you're here. And then my 13-year-old was super into it. He wanted to understand more about it, what I was doing and what these long exposures were going to look like and all this stuff. And then, so they bought into that. So that was an intentional shoot that I went on, but it's much easier to do that than to bring the camera out when everybody's trying to paddleboard and they're just like, Dad, where are you, or things like that. So um and then you talk about the gram, right? So it's such a whole, I remember when Instagram came out. Like I mean that was I remember my first shot on there and the filters that I put on it, and it was literally just a shot on the side of a road, because I was just like, I don't know what this app is, just another app, that's gonna flop or not do well, or whatever it was, because there were a few competing ones at that time for your space. And then when I got to the Dolphins, like I surprisingly, that was 7 years ago now, 2014, 6 years ago. And man, look at how things have changed, right? And teams weren't really putting stuff on Instagram at that point. It has come at us fast. And I turned my Jon Willey account into official Dolphins photog account, and it took off. And almost overnight had like 25,000 followers on there, all for one thing, right? To see Dolphins pictures, and to see the behind the scenes stuff that we were doing with the team at that point. And we were kind of pushing the boundaries on what we could do. We were getting our hands slapped a lot by the NFL for going too far on certain things. But we weren't, that was one of those, we're going to break the rules a little bit until they tell us to stop. And because the rules were just being written, a lot of the rules were written because of us, as weird as it sounds to say. But the endorphins that I was getting from that, there is no doubt that they were huge. The friendships that I was making on that, or the super fans that were tuning in and those sort of things, like, that was real. Like, you felt that. And so you kind of got into that space where you're like, all right, I have to figure out what my cadence is. I have to do all this stuff, and and it becomes another job. And that's crazy to me. And then certainly it's changed quite a bit. Because then team accounts blew up and all that stuff. Um, but I've had friends who were just like, I have to post every day, like, and I have to, like, and if I don't, oh no, or why is it not growing? Why is my following not growing? And that was one of those things that affected my mental health,
Yeah.
like, and because when I went through my depression, like, my art page was starting to take off, and I was getting these commissions to draw and Procreate, and from Apple and from Procreate and different things, and it was amazing. And then I hit a depression. I just stopped drawing, and that page just shut down. The algorithm said, "See ya," and I literally probably stopped drawing for almost 8 months to a year. And at that point, I kind of stopped posting as well to Instagram for my photography stuff too. But then I had to, like, I literally, I remember our family was going on a cruise, and I was just like, all right, I gotta figure out, like, I was on my phone all the time. I was checking into work when I was supposed to be on vacation, doing all this
Mm.
stuff that I probably shouldn't have been doing. And then I came back and I was just like, I'm getting off social for a while. And that was another like low point for me in the midst of that, where what should have been an amazing vacation really wasn't, because we were prepping for the ICC, the International or El Clasico, actually, at that point at the stadium. And there was just so much going on that you kind of feel you had a little bit of FOMO, and you didn't want to be being left out, and you're paying gobs of money for this Wi-Fi on a cruise ship and all this stuff. So that was one of those situations where I had to say, like, okay, I gotta figure my shit out, and I can't let this bother me. And now I don't care. Like, I'll tweet whenever I want to tweet. And I've been tweeting a lot lately because I have a lot to say there, but I'm not trying to be like a thought leader. Like, I think the funniest part is like people telling you should be a thought leader. It's like, if you're if you're trying to tell people that you're a thought leader, you're not a thought leader.
Right.
That's one of those things where it's just like, I just want to either say funny shit or say witty stuff, but I don't care, right? I don't care if it gets 0 likes. Like, the fact that people would take down posts if they didn't get likes in X number of minutes, to me, is kind of mind-boggling. But I've also
Mhm.
seen some of those same people change in the midst of COVID, and they've really come to some really cool discoveries that, like, hey, who I am I used to apologize for not posting. Who are you apologizing to? Like, and why does it matter? Like, they call them your friends, right? And they're called friends, but you don't know half of these people. You don't know most of these people. And so, like, we got so caught up in all the numbers that it got really bad for us. It's still kind of bad for some people.
Mhm.
And that was one of our big things at Better too. Like, that, like, don't make that be such a huge part of your life. Digital wellness is very important.
Yeah.
And so you have to, but it's the same thing, same question I asked Sammy Silverman, on the podcast when he left the startup to go back. Why did you go back? Was it you because you wanted um that roar of the crowd again, and that dopamine hit that came with it? And yeah, like, he was straight up like, yeah, and like, I get it. Like, there is something to that. There is so much energy when you walk out into a stadium, but this nowadays with no fans is really testing you, like testing creatives. And so
Mhm.
some people are turning to Twitter and some people are turning to Instagram or whatever. But man, boy, times have changed, and it's going to be really interesting to see what changes in the coming years, because I think the
Mhm.
NBA is going to start again in a bubble, and so,
I've
that's,
already heard. Yeah.
yep, it's crazy.
Mhm.
So yeah, we have to really kind of define for ourselves what it means, for posting on social. I've had people tell me, like, oh man, you had typos and things like that. And it's like, I really don't care. Like, like, I really don't care. Like, okay, I
Yeah.
made a typo. At least I used punctuation. That's like a step up on most people, tweeting. and
Mhm.
and so it's like, I we take it a little too seriously, and we take ourselves a little too seriously,
Oh
you
yeah.
know, on most of this stuff. So hopefully we get to a point where it can become fun again, because it lost a lot of
Yeah. I think a whole, once we can kind of get a grasp on our industry, I think a whole nother wave, probably even worse, is going to be like the whole um, communication slash social media side of things.
that.
Like those people, like, I mean, like you don't necessarily give a shit like about what I put on social if I miss words or something, but these people,
Yeah.
do,
Hmm.
and they just like ourselves can't separate their personal, you know, side with their business side. So
Yep.
those things clash all the time, and I'm sure I mean, I think I've kind of already seen it, but
Yeah.
it's interesting with them too. Is like they have started to take on some really big roles
Yeah.
in the industry.
Big time.
Like people are putting a lot of pressure on them to succeed with something that we still have no fucking idea what to do with.
Yeah.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, like we've all done it where we're like, yeah, we know what we're doing, and we didn't know.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's been plenty of people who've done that are like, oh fuck, I can't believe I just got myself into this.
Yeah.
And can't say anything because they don't want to be found out and lose their jobs.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Real shit.
I definitely want to open the floor to anybody in that world too for this kind of stuff, because I think they're on their way for what we've already kind of gone through.
Yeah, I think so.
In our industry too. So
yeah. Right.
So man,
awesome, man.
We've had a great conversation, and I feel like there's more to come.
Yes.
Let's
do
I think there's definitely going to be a round 2, if not 3, because the more I hear your podcasts, I'm always like looking out for a notification on when you have a new episode dropping, because I'm
so behind.
I get so excited and to learn about other people and stuff like that. And I appreciate you being on here and being vulnerable and honest and willing to give out, yourself for other people, the name of other people. So serving other people for sure.
Yeah, it's and that's a great point. Like that's the one way that I can do it now, without putting myself in a position where I have to sacrifice my boundaries, because people can now choose to listen to it or not, and it doesn't matter to me. I'm not monetizing it. I'm not trying to trying to grow this into something or putting metrics and analytics on it that I have to hit. For me, it's just you go back to it. Some people say this and some people say it willy-nilly, for lack of a better term, but if I help one person from my podcast, then it did its job.
Yes.
And the fact that I'm getting pretty consistently a couple DMs or texts a week about how much it helped them, like for me, that's it. That's all I need. I didn't even, I just really kind of wanted it to be, it was kind of self-therapy in a sense as well, putting this out there to finally say, like, I'm breaking these chains a little bit, in saying, like, I'm not bashing any humans that help me or burning bridges like we talked about before. I'm just putting it out there so it's real, because this is real life shit that we're dealing with, and this is some life and death shit that we're dealing with. And again, if anybody's dealing with this stuff to the point where they're thinking about about ending things or hurting themselves, like, then listen, there's a lot of people who are in the same space that you are, and you don't have to go there. And there are people like you, and there are people like me, and there are so many others that are out there who are part of this movement to normalize and destigmatize mental health. It's just something that we all live with. So it's truly my pleasure to hop on and chat with you today, man. I'm excited.
Yes, I appreciate you again. Until next time, have a good night in Wisconsin.
Yes, thank you.
And we'll talk again.
Right.
Right. Thanks, man.
All right.
Bye.
See you.
What you gonna play now?